Before we get started with the video, I've recently reactivated one of my alternate channels, Thunderstone Comic Dubs. Head on over there to check out some comic dubs of Undertale and The Amazing Digital Circus. Link down below in the video description. On March 17th, 1993, one of the worst grade crossing accidents in the state of Florida's history would occur in a suburb north of Miami. A somewhat forgotten tragedy that, while the cause sounds simple in nature, the National Transportation Safety Board would discover this fiery hell on earth was a lot more than any simple grade crossing accident. Our story begins in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on a Wednesday. Weather was nice in the 70s in contrast to the blizzard of 93 that had just frozen much of the Northeast. That afternoon on March 17th, 1993, St. Patrick's Day, 51-year-old Vincent DeFrang prepared for his morning routine, including dropping his wife off at work, before heading for his usual afternoon shift at the Hess Terminal in Port Everglades, which usually ran from 2 p.m. to midnight. The Hess Corporation used to be an independent gas station company that ran from its formation in 1919 till being acquired as a subsidiary of Chevron Oil in 2023. However, they had already stopped their gas station chains by 2013. The company is most famous for their annual holiday models and toy trucks released every Christmas season from 1964 to this very day.
For Christmas this year, the Hess truck's here.
Coincidentally, 3 years before the fateful accident in Florida, their 1990 year toy release was a tanker truck, which yours truly had at one point as a child. This was their last tanker truck model they made, not counting miniatures or commemorative edition models. Vincent headed out of the terminal at around 2:30 p.m. with 8,500 gallons of gasoline in the trailer, bound for a Hess gas station in Margate, Florida. Vincent had a Florida Class A commercial driver's license with hazardous material and tank articulated vehicle endorsements, which had been issued on March 24, 1992. He had driven trucks for 18 years and had been employed by the Hess Corporation for 4 years. However, Vincent had not driven the route he was planning to take for at least 9 months because he had been injured on the job and had not returned to work until 1 month before the incident. The truck involved was a 1991 Freightliner 3-axle conventional tractor with a 34-foot-long 1977 Heel aluminum tank trailer that had 5 fuel compartments on 2 rear axles. Meanwhile, Amtrak Train 91, the Silver Star, was nearing the end of its journey from New York City toward Miami, Florida. This long-distance service can trace its origins to its first run on December 12, 1947, being operated jointly by the Pennsylvania Railroad and the Seaboard Airline Railroad, being passed down to Penn Central and Seaboard Coastline after respective mergers, before Amtrak took over on May 1, 1971. The train was headed by an electric locomotive for its trip between New York and Washington, D.C., likely either an EMD AEM7 or General Electric E60, depending on what was available, but after an engine swap at DC, EMD F40PHR 385 was in charge of the train. Behind this 1980s built screamer of a diesel was 11 cars, a material handling boxcar, a baggage car, a diner, 2 sleepers, a cafe car, and 5 coaches. Engineer Billy Parker, roughly 42 years old, was running the train that day, running 3 hours late, which isn't unusual for long-distance Amtrak trains, as they tend to be delayed by the freight railroads, in this case CSX, who owned the right-of-way the train was currently on. He had been hired out originally by the Seaboard Railroad back in the 70s, before joining Amtrak in 1986. Both train and truck were approaching the crossing at Cypress Creek Road, a 6-lane divided roadway with 3 lanes on either side. The Hess truck was on the westbound right lane, moving at a snail's pace, with the train approaching from the north heading southbound, traveling 60 miles per hour according to the locomotive's data recorder, which was the maximum authorized speed of the right-of-way. It was around 3 p.m., and a perfect storm of trouble was brewing. The road was being widened, so the left and center lanes were closed just west of the tracks to accommodate the roadwork, and traffic was heavily congested, with people trying to squeeze into the single right lane. The crossing soon activated, warning of the incoming Amtrak train. 5 different witnesses testified they saw the gate come down on the hood of the truck's cab near the windshield. The engineer stated the truck's cab was just over the east rail, with a white car sitting on top of the tracks. He immediately put the train into a 6-pound brake application and started blaring the horn in the crossing sequence. The car in question moved forward, giving the truck room to pull forward and sit right on the tracks, breaking the crossing gate in the process as it strikes the exhaust stack. Upon seeing his worst nightmare come true, Engineer Billy slammed the brakes into emergency, sounding the horn in alarm, before diving toward the rear of the cab to brace for impact.
Yes, there's been a large explosion on Cypress Creek right in front of the Sterling Suite. And on the train tracks, and it keeps exploding.
Okay, what exploded?
Shut up. Wait, what? I'm on 911.
What exploded, ma'am?
Cypress Creek on the train tracks.
What exploded?
I don't know. It looks like a train, possibly. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Okay, we'll get someone out there, ma'am.
At 3:13 p.m., the train struck the tanker truck at over 35 miles per hour. The impact spun the trailer clockwise nearly 90 degrees, rupturing in a massive explosion, knocking down one of the crossing cantilevers. The fireball and impact dented the locomotive's nose. The engineer, just before impact, had dived toward the rear of the cab and curled himself into a ball to brace for impact. He was uninjured, apart from his hair on his left side being singed from the explosion. The fire quickly engulfed the truck cab and spread towards several vehicles that were waiting for the train to pass that got caught in the traffic. Firefighters were quick to respond and douse the gasoline-soaked roadway with water and search for either survivors or bodies. 6 people, including the truck driver, were killed. One victim was found with their body sitting straight up with their hands fused to the steering wheel, frozen in place from the intense heat. 19 were injured on the Amtrak train, 11 being passengers and 8 were crew members, but no fatalities occurred on board. All the injured were treated and released. The fire burned for hours, severely damaging the baggage car, diner, and 1 sleeper car. 6 automobiles and the tanker truck were destroyed, totaling $116,000 in damages. Amtrak listed the equipment damages at $900,000, and Hess also had to pay $450,000 for environmental cleanup from residue gasoline spillage. Investigators descended onto the scene to determine what exactly happened. Diving into the truck driver's record, Vincent had received 9 safety awards in the previous 3 years, and was regarded as an experienced, qualified driver. But his record did show that according to the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles, between 1982 and 1988, he had been cited for speeding 3 times, following too close once, and operating a motor vehicle with improper equipment once. The NTSB, though, couldn't determine whether these violations occurred while he was driving a truck for the company or his personal vehicle, but he did have no accidents on his record. There was also no evidence that he was either fatigued or under the influence behind the wheel. The crossing at Cypress Creek Road was fully protected, equipped with bells, gates reaching 38 feet long, and large cantilevers with red lights, similar to this design seen here in East Norriton, Pennsylvania. The crossings were tested by the National Transportation Safety Board and would activate just under 3,000 feet north of the crossing for southbound traffic, and traffic traveling 60 miles per hour confirmed that 2 seconds after the train passed the sensor, the lights would flash and the bell would ring. 9 seconds later, the crossing gates would lower, and after 7 seconds, the gates were fully down, and then the train would pass 14 seconds later. In total, that's about 30 seconds after the train activates the crossing. The crossing didn't malfunction, as all witness testimony, CSX maintenance records, and NTSB testing concluded the system was working as intended. So if it takes about 11 seconds for a truck driver to drive a truck across the tracks, keeping a law in mind where a truck with hazmat loads must stop before proceeding across the tracks, just like school buses, that still leaves about 9 seconds before the train arrives at the crossing. Witnesses also stated that when the truck stopped on the crossing, it rolled backwards slightly as if the driver was changing gears, and then proceeded slowly across the tracks. Investigators concluded that the truck either stayed roughly in its place when the gate lowered on the truck's nose, or had floored it across the tracks. Even if it meant bumping a few cars out of the way, it would have never been hit by the Amtrak train. However, let's play devil's advocate here, as in all accidents, it's never one person, system failure, or force of nature that causes accidents. There's always a chain of events and factors that contribute or lead to disaster. This incident was one of them, and of course the railroads of CSX and Amtrak were in no way responsible, so attention soon shifted to the construction workers and the road work on this busy roadway, and busy is an understatement. Data taken on February 9, 1993 showed that the average daily traffic count was over 50,500 cars. Between 1979 and 1992, the Cypress Creek Road crossing had 3 incidents take place, one involving a fatality, and had an average of 19 school bus crossings daily. Florida's Railway Highway Grade Crossing Safety Index ratings range from 0 to 90. Anything below 70 isn't considered safe. Cypress Creek's safety index was 18.94, ranking it 15th out of 4,100 crossings in Florida, all of which see over 100 accidents per year. On paper, the solution would be to turn the crossing into an overpass where either road or rail grade is moved so one can pass above or below safely. But realistically, this can't be done because the I-95 overpass is too close to the crossing, and the cost to do so, not to mention service interruptions to car and train traffic alike, wouldn't be worth it. All crossing safety comes down to education and knowing better at the end of the day. The NTSB also had some strong criticism for the engineering firm of Kunde, Sprecher, Yaskin and Associates Incorporated, who was hired by Broward County to design plans and to provide construction inspection services for widening Cypress Creek Road. In 1992, the county contracted with W. Jackson & Sons Construction Company to carry this out. This 540-day job involved widening the roadway from 6 to 8 lanes, resurfacing the highway, constructing storm drainage, as well as installing signalization, signing, pavement markings, landscaping, irrigation, and streetlights. The accident happened on day 241 of this project during drainage installation a mere 236 feet west of the crossing. East of the crossing, signs were in place warning drivers of the roadwork. However, all 3 signs were placed 1,500, 1,000, and 500 feet before the crossing because the lane closure started practically immediately west of the crossing. Traffic was being moved into the right lane and into a right turn lane that was being used as a through lane. You can only imagine the traffic carnage this would cause, and witness testimony confirmed it. Now, during previous phases of the project, the lanes had been closed by tapering the traffic on the east side of the crossing. This, however, caused traffic jams at an intersection just east of the area, and the intersection's 2 left turn lanes had all backed up. So the contractor, with the design engineer's approval, moved the tapering to the west side of the crossing. Now, one would argue that having the closed lanes mere inches away from the crossing was just a recipe for disaster, especially since in driving culture, not many people are willing to let a big, slow truck go ahead of them, but that's beside the point, because the county project manager, design engineer, and the contractor did not consult with CSX, who own the tracks, for how the crossing might affect the construction project and lane closures necessary for the project, nor did they have any idea in their right minds the disaster waiting to happen. To make matters worse, the manual on uniform traffic control devices, which is what the design engineer and contractors had to comply with, had no mention of addressing work zones near railroad crossings. Just that, in quote, additional protection must be provided when special complexities and hazards prevail. The project prescribed for each situation shall be based on the speed and volume of traffic, duration of operation, and exposures to hazards. That's a bit broad. The NTSB argued this tapering and lane closure should have started east of the crossing no matter what. Sure, traffic would be further backed up, but it's better than having the backup right at the crossing. And although crossing gates are designed to brake in a situation a driver gets trapped on the crossing, very few drivers are willing to do that and rather either panic and bail out or just sit on the tracks in vain before disaster strikes. And sadly, that being the case in countless crossing accidents, especially since, according to Operation Lifesaver, every 3 hours a train hits a car, truck, or person in the United States. And in every case, the accidents are always preventable, and sadly, sometimes fatal. The NTSB published their final report on February 15, 1994, at 21 pages long, listing 6 findings, and that the probable cause was the inadequacy of the precautions taken by the Broward County project manager, the design engineer, and the contractor, which resulted in heavy car traffic on top of the crossing, and the truck driver's reckless decision to cross the railroad tracks even though the warning system had been activated. Recommendations were sent out to the Federal Highway Administration, the Hess Corporation, and the American Trucking Association to reevaluate their procedures in their respective fields of the accident and to educate their personnel under their control the consequences of not respecting railroad crossings. The crossing in question is still in use today. It sports a double-track main line now instead of a single-track main, as well as a more vast light system, including signs with flashers on top stating, "Do not stop on tracks," which few people see as a chilling reminder of what happened on this very spot in 1993. The former Seaboard right-of-way is still in use by CSX, Amtrak, and even Tri-Rail commuter service, which is the whole reason the trackage became a 2-main right-of-way. As for the equipment, not much was said on the rolling stock, but it's very likely the diner in particular was scrapped from heavy fire damage, though little info is available, so take that with a grain of salt. The locomotive, F40 PHR 385, was repaired and returned to service. After retirement from Amtrak, it was sold to the Canadian American Railroad, renumbered S453, and rebuilt for freight service as an F40M-2F, until the line ceased operations in 2002, where 453 was sold again to the San Luis and Rio Grande Railroad in 2006. It was sold off 1 year later to an unknown source, but it's fair to assume it was scrapped by LTEX or was stripped of parts, as sister units also ended up there and didn't really make it out. Engineer Billy Parker is still alive today, one of 2 engineers that have struck gasoline tanker trucks and lived to tell the story. He worked for Operation Lifesaver for 10 years before becoming an engineer again in 2003. I'm sorry to say his near-death experience in 1993 wasn't the only incident, as there were 2 prior incidents of car versus train or car versus person in that order that he had between 1991 and 1992. The accident with the tanker in 93 shattered him emotionally unlike any other accident, which is often reality for a lot of engineers. In his quotes, "It's not a matter of if, but when." He would retire for good on November 6, 2006, after yet another accident saw his train smash another semi-truck, thankfully not pulling gasoline, but still killing the truck driver in a fireball of diesel fuel when the truck's fuel tank burst. No doubt this brought back the painful memories of Fort Lauderdale in 1993, and he just couldn't take it anymore. Wherever he is now, I'd like to wish him all the best. We've got your back, brother, and it wasn't your fault. None of those accidents were your fault.
And we ask ourselves, how in the world, why in the world do things like this happen? Do horrible collisions like this happen? Ladies and gentlemen, it's very important that I stress to you today that it is certainly not my intent to put the blame on anyone or anything. The solution is to continue to educate we, the general American public, along with professional truck drivers and law enforcement officers, about the dangers at railroad crossings.
33 years have passed since this tragedy, and if anything can be taken away from this video, it should hopefully be this. When approaching a railroad crossing, slow down, look both ways, and listen for trains. Anytime is train time, and just like airplanes, they can seem slower than they appear at a distance. Don't ever race a train to a crossing. Even if you tie, you'll still lose to the train. Only cross when there is enough room and time on the other side to make it across safely. You wouldn't stop in the middle of an intersection when there's traffic, so why do it on a railroad crossing? After all, it takes about 1.5 miles to stop a train going 55 miles per hour. When the crossings do activate when approaching, stop immediately behind the gates. Sure, it's frustrating to wait, unless you're a rail fan like myself, but the wait is a lot better than a funeral. If you become gate trapped as the crossings activate as you're sitting on top of the tracks, find any outlet to clear the crossing as fast as possible, even if it means hitting the dirt or breaking the gates. The gates are only fiberglass after all, and have a bolt hinge design that snaps with enough pressure. If not, or if your car stalls, bail and get out of there. Saving that old fartmobile ain't worth your life. Remember, trains of today are much more quiet than trains of yesterday.
Take care.
Especially compared to steam locomotives of Grandpa's time. And don't get me started on whisper quiet electrics. They've spooked me before. Together, we can help make crossing tragedies like the Fort Lauderdale collision a little less frequent.